The total number of living humans on Earth has surpassed 7 billion, and as this number grows, it becomes more difficult to discover areas of the planet that are unaffected by man-made pollution and growth. Like this place that's so toxic, it caused mutations, and a place where even the grandchildren of the victims aren't safe. First though, let's visit this mine that caused more than pollution. La Araya, Peru. Limited testing has indicated lead, arsenic, and cadmium soil contamination across La Araya, a mining town in the Peruvian Andes, which can be directly ascribed to an American-owned smelter that has polluted the city since 1922. Every 24 hours, the main chimney emitted 1.5 tons of lead and 810 tons of sulfur dioxide, which was more than 4 times the maximum allowed by the Peruvian law. This has resulted in an alarming 91% of children in La Arroya suffering from acute lead poisoning, which causes neurological, gastrointestinal, renal, and reproductive issues. They're exposed to arsenic, cadmium, and other metals and toxins in addition to lead. Residents of La Arroya filed a complaint with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in 2006, accusing the Peruvian government of allowing the smelting firm to pollute at will. Residents described burning throats and eyes, headaches, and difficulties breathing during the hearings. Others reported tumors, muscle difficulties, and infertility caused by smelting pollution. The panel concluded in 2021 that the state had failed to supervise and oversee the mining company's behavior and had compromised its obligation to guarantee human rights. Bhopal gas disaster. JP Nagar people have no way of escaping their ghosts. This rundown neighborhood on the outskirts of the Indian city of Bhopal is just meters away from the chemical facility that exploded shortly after midnight on December 2nd, 1984. This poisoned their lives for the rest of, well, their lives. Behind the factory walls, the charcoal ruins of the Union Carbide plant still loom. It's still considered the world's worst industrial disaster. It released 40 tons of toxic methyl isocyanate gas released into the atmosphere, instantly killing over 3,000 people. And then it condemned hundreds of thousands to a life of pain, cancer, stillbirths, miscarriages, lungs and heart disease, and the deaths of everyone around them. The lingering impact on the second and third generations, as well as those yet to be born, is what worries residents in Bhopal the most, though. Over 1,000 children have been enrolled at the Chingari Children's Center, which was formed for kids born with disabilities because of the accident. Most of them have cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, autism, intellectual disabilities, and significant learning difficulties. Rashida B., the center's creator, said that this is the terrible legacy of Bhopal. Citarum River, Indonesia. When questioned about their catch, fishermen living on the Citarum River's banks could only laugh softly. They said that they could no longer call themselves fishermen. For the past years, their money has come from fishing used things, such as glass bottles from the pile of debris in what is commonly referred to as the world's most filthy river. Yes, these people are no longer fishermen. They're now simply garbage collectors. No less than 20,000 tons of garbage and 340,000 tons of wastewater are dumped straight into the Citarum River every day, most of it coming from 2,000 textile industries. It's no surprise that the fish are mostly gone in Java's third largest river. The Citarum River in West Java is regarded as the dirtiest river on the planet. Every day, textile mills dump tons of untreated hazardous waste into the river. Locals also utilize the river as a dumping ground, disposing of excrement and household rubbish in its waters. Despite the river's filth, at least 30 million people in West Java rely on it to irrigate the agricultural that sustains them. Hazaribagh, Bangladesh. Tanning is a process that converts rawhides or animal skins with the application of chemical agents to produce the leather items that we're accustomed to. This happens at around 110 facilities across the U.S. Nearly 250 tanneries are located on less than 1 square mile of land in Hazaribagh, Bangladesh. Hazaribagh residents are at risk of being exposed to cancer-causing hexavalent chromium, as well as other skin and respiratory illnesses. Up to 95% of Bangladesh's registered tanneries are located in and around Hazaribagh. These tanneries use antiquated procedures and discharge toxic waste. This includes cancer-causing hexavalent chromium into adjacent water, resulting in a soup of organic and inorganic compounds. Tannery employees in Hazaribagh live on top of polluted streams and canals, while informal recyclers burn leather scraps, contaminating the air even more. As a result, people are more likely to suffer from skin and respiratory ailments, as well as acid burns, rashes, disorientation, and nausea. There are dozens more sites like this all around the world, but Bangladesh is probably the most serious. Dzержinsk, Russia. It didn't take long for the story to go global when a group of dogs in the small Russian town of Dzержinsk was recently discovered to be all blue. While some were concerned about how it occurred, others focused on how cute it made them look. That was most likely due to the town's high concentration of toxins like copper sulfate, which means the dogs got lucky. As it happens, Dzierżyk may be the world's most chemically polluted city, and turning blue is far from the worst thing that may happen if you end up there. Dzierżyk was the site of various Soviet chemical warfare experiments between 1939 and 1988. Throughout the Cold War, over 300,000 tons of chemical waste, including hazardous neurotoxins like sarin, were dumped in and around the town, traces of which can still be detected in everything from the town's soil to its water supply. Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan. Semipalatinsk may appear to be a tranquil, distant town in Kazakhstan at first glance, yet it's one of the most radioactive sites on the planet. It was one of the Soviet Empire's largest nuclear testing facilities, hosting roughly 1/4 of all nuclear tests in the world at its peak. While the Soviets and their nuclear arsenal are no longer present, their long-term ramifications can still be felt in places like Semi. Over 1.5 million people lived nearby at the time of the testing, and over 100,000 are still suffering from harmful health impacts, including cancer and deformities that were handed down through generations. The testing site, which was known as the Polygon, was used for approximately 110 nuclear tests. All these were between 1949 and 1963. Kabwe, Zambia. According to environmental specialists, Kabwe is the world's most toxic town where widespread lead poisoning has almost surely harmed the brains and other organs of generations of children. This is where children continue to be poisoned every day. The 220,000 person town, located 100 kilometers north of the capital Lusaka and close to Central Africa's copper belt, was once a thriving center for lead mining and smelting, leaving a really poisonous legacy. While the initial stages of a cleanup have been taken, new risks are arising as desperately poor people scavenge in the enormous slag heap known as Black Mountain. The true impact on Kabwe's population is yet to be completely understood. The emissions from the massive state-owned smelter, which closed in 1994, contaminated the dusty soil in the surrounding area. This surrounding area was littered with dangerously high quantities of lead. The metal, which is still used in automobile batteries around the world, is a strong neurotoxic that is especially harmful to youngsters. However, it's children who swallow the most, especially as newborns who begin to play outside and constantly put their hands in their mouths. Now it's time for today's best pick. Today's photo looks to be a cow with extra appendages. This wasn't caused by toxins, but rather due to genetic mutation. And in our next entry, this place is considered to be so toxic that it caused various animal mutations. Chernobyl, Ukraine. According to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, one of the nuclear power plants at the facility was destroyed on April 26, 1986, triggering a fire and spilling enormous amounts of radioactive debris into the air. The exclusion zone, which stretched for 18 miles around the site, was restricted to only those that had to be there. Increased rates of gene mutations as well as other illnesses such as tumors and cataracts began to affect the area flora and fauna. The majority of domestic animals have relocated away from the accident, and the deformed farm animals that were born did not breed. Following the accident, scientists concentrated on studies of wild animals and pets that had been left behind in order to understand more about Chernobyl's impact. Ranchers rapidly noted an increase in genetic defects in farm animals following the Chernobyl disaster. The incidence of malformations increased again in 1989 and 1990, probably as a result of radiation emitted from the sarcophagus designed to isolate the nuclear core. Around 400 malformed animals were born in 1990. The majority of abnormalities were so severe that the animals only lived a few hours. Facial abnormalities, additional appendages, odd pigmentation, and diminished size are examples of defects. Cattle and pigs were the most mutated domestic animals. Cows exposed to fallout and fed radioactive feed also generated radioactive milk. Agbogbloshi dump site, Ghana. Going entirely electronic may appear to be more environmentally friendly than using paper, but consumers rarely consider what happens to their devices after they've upgraded to the next model. The usual destination for them is Ghana. Though most e-waste from the US ends up in Asia, according to Jack Caravanos, research director at the Blacksmith Institute, much of the electronic debris from Europe ends up in Africa. Ghana imports 215,000 tons of used consumer electronics each year and generates another 129,000 tons. The issue emerges while attempting to disassemble the machines into spare parts. The most hazardous activity is the scorching of copper wires to remove the plastic coating. Metals produced during this process are frequently found in the air and soil near densely populated places. However, putting a stop to this has been very difficult. From arsenic to zinc, electronic waste contains approximately half of all the elements in the periodic table. If left untreated, these poisons have the potential to do enormous damage, particularly in poor countries with no or limited environmental cleanup. Norilsk, Russia. Almost everyone in Norilsk now has a tie to the nickel factory, either directly or indirectly through Norilsk Nickel or one of the many firms that rely on it. However, having such a massive job producer in the city has come at a horrible cost. Norilsk is now the most polluted city in Russia and one of the top 10 polluted cities in the world. Every year, the nickel plant emits about 2 million tons of hazardous gas, including sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, carbon, phenols, and other contaminants. This one city accounts for about 1% of total global sulfur dioxide emissions. Because the air is so dirty, many people mine the surface soil for soot, which contains valuable minerals. This not only causes acid rain, which destroys many of the surrounding trees, but it also has a severe impact on Norilsk's residents. A worker's life expectancy in Norilsk is just 59 years old, which is 10 years lower than the Russian average. Cancer rates in the city are also twice as high as in the rest of Russia. On top of all that, the neighboring Daldikan River turned blood crimson amid terrifying scenes in September of 2016. No official explanation was given for this horrific phenomenon, which some people put down to a warning from God about an approaching world war. The more likely explanation was a runoff from a nearby smelting factory. See you all next time!